Bam.
Hi, this is Erik Kleinsmith, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
I'm just going to say fuck Hamas right now, right from the start. This is look, you and I know a lot about war. We know a lot about intelligence, and there's a lot of history that goes into this. And the surprise attack on Israel has to be talked about, and I think we have to bring some sanity to this. There's a lot of excitable news coverage, so let's just back up. Let's slow down. And let's talk a little bit about how we got here. How did we get to a spot where it's okay to attack women, children, elderly people, take them, kidnap them, run them through the streets, rape them? I mean, that's how did we get to a spot where we got here?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a series. A series. This is the next step of what has not worked in the past, and what I mean by that is there are so many things that the both historically the Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, and then backed by Arab countries in the past. There's been several. This is one of several wars that Israelis have always fought. And I remember talking to an Israeli officer when we were when I was stationed at Fort Huachuca. And one of the things that he pressed upon us is like, you Americans, you don't understand. We cannot afford to lose one war.
Right.
And so from their creation, from the United Nations Charter in 1948, they were immediately invaded by all the neighboring Arab countries, to include Egypt, Syria, even Iraq sent a contingent all the way over to help invade. And from 1948 to 1949, the Israelis beat them back with this brand new country that was just fledgling but out of nowhere. And then they fought again in 1956. Nasser in Egypt decided to take over the Suez Canal, and the British and French actually dropped paratroopers themselves, and the Israelis took the Sinai Peninsula in order to buffer, create a buffer zone for that. Then the 1967, the 6-Day War took place, where the Israelis were tipped off that an attack by Nasser again was going to take place in concert with the Syrians. And the Israelis beat them so soundly and so badly that it was a 5 years until 1973. They decided, let's attack during the Yom Kippur celebration. So this is the 50th anniversary of that war, which was about the most, up until the time, the most successful. So you have all these Arab countries that are invading Israel over, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and none of them are successful. And there's a reason behind that, is because Arab nations were not made. There's a book out there that just said why Arabs can't win wars, and one of the reasons because the way a totalitarian regime or an old monarchy regime is set up, their armies are not made to invade and conduct foreign campaigns. They're made to keep the regime in power. And so they're very defensive in nature, very, very internally focused, and their major threat is their own population, not the Israelis. So these armies are trying to, antiquated organization and mindset within these armies are trying to fight an Israeli force, which is a volunteer democracy, professional fighting force. Oh, by the way, backed up by the best technology in the world, Americans. So that's kind of what led to a little bit of where we are now, because there's no more invasions of other countries. In fact, a lot of these same countries are now entering into recognition of Israel. We've got the Abraham Accords, which is, I'm trying to remember, that UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Morocco, all these countries, Sudan even, recognize Israel. And now we're on the cusp of one of the center of the Sunni Arab world, the Saudi Arabians, on the cusp of doing the same thing and formalizing relationships with Israel. For the Shia Arabs, and this is Iran, who are at complete odds against Saudi Arabia, this is at odds to their goal. And so this is why you see the Iranian involvement.
One of the things, I put a link down below. There's a speech from Golda Meir. This is after all the atrocity that went on in Munich.
Yeah.
And she mentions, like, we're a country that's 25 years old, and for every year of our existence, we have had a war.
Right.
Every year.
Right.
And you realize, like, wait, what? And it's like our neighbors have invaded us every year. We have to justify our existence.
Right.
And when you see history of Israel portrayed, you often see it portrayed as a recent thing. if you read Bibi Netanyahu's book, he's like, hey, let's not forget the Jews are an ancient people, the Chaldeans, all of these people, the Assyrians, these are ancient people who are from this part of the world. So you may want to start 100 years ago and say, the Israelis lived that's a version of history, but this stuff goes way back. And I don't want to minimize how long people have been in the entire region, Palestine and everything else.
Sure.
I want to say Palestinians don't have some kind of claim to that. But when you try to make like this is like a recent thing, that's not real. And like you said, every time someone fights Israel has to win. They do. And so this is a continuation of this. And for those that don't know, there was earlier this year, there was a problem where there was a desecration of a mosque.
Right.
And that this action was in retaliation. So the desecration of the mosque was some Jewish folks were going to sacrifice a goat at the mosque. And well, here's the thing. Even if they do this thing, that is considered illegal by some people. Other people would say it's just a sacrament.
Right.
It doesn't justify raping, killing, kidnapping innocent people, right? So there's a scope that they're missing. And when the government leaders of Palestine have said we endorse this attack, when the religious leader of Iran is tweeting on X that he's like, this is good, we want this.
Sure.
Okay, well, you've now crossed the line that I think 99% of the world is saying, hey, you know what? None of us are good with this. And it's going to be a real problem.
Well, again, it's the frustrate. I mean, and I don't want to say I sympathize with the Palestinian people or the cause, but their frustration of backing losing invasion after another. I mean, the Palestinians were cheering when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. They were celebrating in the streets. This is fantastic. And as soon as Desert Storm kicked off, they were really, really quiet all of a sudden because they knew it's like, good Lord, we backed another loser. And so that's where, when conventional means of overrunning and destroying Israel, as a stated goal. And again, if you look at the Hamas charter, the 5 original members, the Hamas was created after the disaster of the 67 Six-Day War because of the frustration of these Arab countries that say that they're going to back us, that they fail at every turn. We can't rely upon them anymore. And we also can't rely upon conventional force to go after. So we have to go towards what works for us and what is within our means. And that, quite frankly, is the birth of when the terror movement really started. The first terrorist attack on Israel was a hijacking of an El Al flight. And it went off without a hitch. I think it was resolved fairly peacefully, but that was the first and last time an El Al aircraft has ever been taken. They did it again. It was what turned into the Dawson's Field incident. That was 1970, where they were able to take in 3 aircraft and blow them up, send them over to Syria and blow them up. But they felt that at first in the 60s and 70s and even early 80s that those kinds of attacks would help bring attention to our cause. But again, they were not successful in the ultimate goal. So then you have in the 80s, again, 1982, when the Israelis invaded southern Lebanon to stop indiscriminate rocket attacks from the southern part of the country, but then also they came in and snatched 2 Israeli soldiers and took them hostage. And so the Israelis invaded all the way up until Lebanon, stopped short, and then this almost the same replay of that again took place in 2006. So they're fighting on the north against Hezbollah that are based primarily out of Syria and Lebanon. And Hamas is based primarily out of Gaza City, which is kind of sticking in between on the Mediterranean coast, right in between Israel and Egypt, which is a very very tiny strip of land, but it's just an immense amount of I don't want to say just generational indoctrination of one generation of another to hate the Jew, to hate the Israelis. That's why you see on the news today, you'll see a father with his daughter on her shoulders, and she's carrying an M4, trying to load it with a clip, although there's already a clip in it, and she's got a pistol in the other hand, and this girl couldn't be over 7, 8 years old. Right. I mean, that's what I mean by you're never going to end this conflict unless a generation, this generational programming to hate to hate another people stops.
Yeah. So there's a lot of hate and a lot of back and forth, a lot of failed negotiations. And I suppose we have to be fair here and talk about Israel's role in some of this. Look, they both have gone crawfish on deals, right? They both have done things that are doesn't best represent the nation. I suppose if you read Bibi Netanyahu's book, he would say, look at the areas that we control and where they are, and look at the areas that the Palestinians control. They do nothing with it. Even the Palestinian, the Arabs who live in Israel, they do well. So people who partner with us and live with us are welcome. They're part of our nation. But the ones that don't want that, they don't build anything. They just destroy things. And so that's his argument, right? It's like, do something. Well, create a second state, but they don't.
It's kind of medieval. One of the medieval tactics was when you besieged the castle. If you think of Israel as the castle, is the folks in the castle would throw out all the mouths that they're feeding the civilians. And so this didn't happen. I mean, Israelis didn't throw them out in this case, but when the state of Israel was created, most of the Palestinians moved out into neighboring countries: Egypt, Gaza, Syria, Jordan, but those countries didn't accept them. And the same thing happened in the Middle Ages. The armies that were besieging the castle, they didn't want to feed them either. So there's several cases where there's folks that are caught in between countries, and they kept these folks in camps. I mean, millions of refugees for years. Right. And they just became just fertile ground for hatred and terrorism and fighters. This is where the Intifada started in the early 2000s, the first suicide bombers, especially, and this is how females as a terrorist could get into the game by killing themselves and blowing themselves up. So that's, again, when the tactics of conventional warfare don't work, you switch to terrorist tactics. When you start taking aircraft and hostages, those are successful to a point, but then all of a sudden, this is the rise of your elite counterterrorism teams in different countries. The Germans created GSG-9 as soon as the Munich Olympics went haywire with a very amateur attempt to try to rescue the hostages on the tarmac. The French have their force. It was after the disaster of Eagle One that Delta was created. I mean, so it's and that's Eagle One is our attempt to rescue hostages, the hostages in Iran in 1979 to 1980. So you have the Western response was able to then counter the act of taking hostages. And so it then turned to a more secure way of conducting bombing attacks. And so that's where you had, for the longest time, you had that where almost exclusively was bombing, whether it was, sacrificing yourself in a suicide attack like 9/11 or firing Katyusha rockets or indiscriminate rockets that were funded obviously by other countries from Gaza or from Hezbollah or mortar rounds. You're able to conduct your attack and then have at least a chance of living. Whereas if you're doing a hostage attack, your survivability is incredibly low. So we have several years, actually decades of indiscriminate rocket attacks and bombings and things like that. Those also are not working. And those are not garnering any kind of area. The best thing that they've had has been the information operations or the PR campaign about the Israeli response. And so this is what I would be looking for in the next couple of days as the Israelis respond. And they've already said, we're going to respond in the most brutal manner because this is war to us. There's once again, we can't afford to lose this war. We lose one war, we're done. And so one of their entire goals is to garner an Israeli response that they can then say, look how horrible this is. They blew up a school or they blew up a hospital or a mosque or whatever. But when you look at it, though, they're putting anti-aircraft emplacements there into these schools or into these, no-go zones to bring in these attacks. And once you do that, you may have a mosque that's, a religious ground that is sacred, and it should be sacred to everyone. But as soon as you put an air defense artillery or a rocket system in there, that is no longer a mosque; it's a military target.
Yeah, I mean, it's adorable when you think that you can do loopholes and try to trick God, but you're not going to trick us. When you bring weapons into the mosque and we find out about it, we go into the mosque, we go, yeah, that rule doesn't apply when you do these kind of things. The one of the things I wanted to bring up as we talk about this and we look at when you break the rules, right? Like there had been some things, and when the Palestinian leadership can say this is justified because whatever justification, right. There is no justification when you attack civilians. You want to make a military attack and create a war against military targets. That's one thing. That'll probably get the world to turn against you. But I don't understand what Hamas thinks they're going to get from this. I mean, look, they can't think. Look, right now, the Ford is showing up. And anytime, this is for any country in the world that wants to do something and have something really bad happens, this is the Death Star is now showing up on the shores of Israel, Palestine. And you cannot move the Ford. You are not going to do anything about it. It's going to be there as long as it wants to be. Right. And it's one of the most powerful things on the earth. It's a gentle menace. It's not there to harm anybody, but all of the assets it brings with it are now focused on this attack. And that means Egypt won't do anything. Jordan won't do it. Nobody, not that Jordan or Egypt would, but nobody's going to do anything negative and get involved with that because the Ford is now there. And the Ford, by the way, the Ford is an aircraft carrier. So when you bring a carrier group to a fight, there is no one is going to be stupid enough to bring that force against whatever it is that they think they're going to do.
Right. Well, I mean, again, the Israelis have one of the most, for the size of its country, they have one of the most powerful armies in the world.
Right.
Their percentage, I mean, I'm trying to put this in U.S. context. Like the percentage of Americans, citizens versus who we have in our military protecting us is less than 1%.
Right.
For the Israelis, it's usually around 6% are in their military. And so when they say we're mobilizing everybody, that's 300,000 people that are taking up, that are taking up arms and going to their activation units and rolling out. That's huge. I mean, it's as large as it's not as large as what we use to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait, but it's in that ballpark of size. But that's their life. Anybody who's been to Israel sees, young, 20-somethings, they're in a social environment, but they're carrying M16s or M4s on their back while they're out and about with their friends or something like that. That's what an armed society looks like. So yes, they were caught. I mean, they were attacked from, good Lord, they were attacked from the sea. They were attacked from gliders coming in, and this is where the largest massacre took place, was at this music rave, which was there for peace. Yeah. And a lot of foreigners and they've not come out with the amount of with the Americans that were killed or taken hostage, but there were Americans that were involved with that, and most likely are casualties because of this. So they came in. This is not one of those spur of the moment operations. This had to have been planned out for at least 2 years. Yeah. Or a year and a half, I want to say. To at least that from concept to planning to targeting to weaponizing to forward positioning your element to putting those all together. And a group like Hamas has, they do not, by themselves, they do not have the wherewithal to pull something like this.
That's right.
And so a great colleague of mine that is a counterterrorism expert. One of the things he said is, like, you got to look at it. If you look at it in terms of American football, Hamas and Hezbollah are the players on the field. But for Hezbollah, the coach is Syria and the owner of the team is Iran. For Hamas, it's just a direct link to the owner. And they're two different organizations on how they are organized. Hezbollah is very military organized, has a traditional hierarchy with cells and brigades and things like that, where Hamas is a very flat and linear organization with a very small core of centralized decision makers, and then lots of independent teams, even though they'll call them either like the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade or the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine or something like that. They all pretty much will wire back into a tight core leadership, and so that's really what you're going to see. The first targets that the Israelis are going to go after are, and they'll fight a different war in the north than they will in Gaza. So the Gaza will be take out the head first, and again, just looking at some of the videos, these aren't forces that are there to occupy for a long time. They don't have, you don't see, again, amateur study tactics, professional study logistics. These guys do not have the wherewithal to stay and occupy. They're there just to kill and move out and try to survive, and then garnering a response that is brutal is what they want to do. But I think with the way that they've done this, they've really made an error by these indiscriminate, just horrific acts. I don't see a lot of folks having, other than your immediate, your folks who are out in the street or whatever protesting. You're not going to see an immediate response that's from around the world that's going to support it.
There's a couple things to say, and I want to back up the time a little bit because you mentioned the Israeli approach to war, how they provision it, and how we might do it. Right. We are not the Israelis, right? We're their supporter, we're their dad or their mom or whatever. But when you read Netanyahu's book, if you haven't read it, this is a great resource. That's why I keep talking about. I'll put a link for it here in the notes here in a second. But when we think, there was a recent series of bombs thrown over into Israel, they call that a war.
Yeah.
We were at war with Palestine. That was, and then they have a numbering system. And so they can talk specifically. We don't even keep track of that, but they see that as a life and death struggle. So we have to understand that. When Wrath of God started, right, Golda Meir is like, I'm going to kill every one of you motherfuckers. I don't care who gets killed in the process. I mean, that's what she says, right? Here's one of the things these guys did. This is what Mossad did. They took out an obituary for a guy that wasn't even dead yet and made sure he saw it.
Yeah.
They're cold.
Yep. There is a thought, and this is, and I read this in the late, honest to God, I read this on top of my tank in the 80s while I'm sitting out in the field on a maneuver as a counterterrorism, started in the counterterrorism in the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the things that this author, who was an anonymous author because he was a counterterrorism, basically an operative in the Middle East, and he just said, look, you really have three options. If they conduct a terrorist attack, especially like a hostage, like if you negotiate and offer payment, all you're doing is funding the next attack. If you try to ignore it or not exact any kind of punishment, you're inviting weakness for the next attack. And his last part was, but if you go out and you kill them, the next one is if you capture them, you're then prompting sympathy for the next attack. So that, he gave three options, but last one he goes, if you kill them, you may garner admonishment from the international community, but your problem is going to be dead. And so the conclusion of this author was there is only one viable option in the author's mind. Now, couple that with Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah,
he's go back to the 70s and the raid on Entebbe, where the Israeli airliner was taken to Uganda. The hostages were deplaned and put in the air terminal. The Israelis mounted a coordinated commando attack to rescue the hostages. All the terrorists were killed. I think 3 of the hostages were killed. 1 Israeli commando was killed, and it was the leader of the raid, and it was a guy named Yoni Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu's brother. So that's his mind. That's in his mindset. My family has already given blood, along with other families, to die to protect what we have available. That's going to be if you don't think that's a serious part of his thought processes and his decision making, you're a fool.
Yeah. And his brother didn't have to do that fight, but he was desperate to be a lion,
right?
And took it on. One of the other things that you can learn about Israel that we may not know because we just don't have it is, and again, Netanyahu is clear about this. There's not going to be a 2-state solution, And he doesn't have a lot of respect for how Americans tell Israel what to do. He's like, I've handled this. That's why I keep getting elected prime minister. That's why we focused on tech. That's why we are a world leader on tech. That's why our Arab neighbors who work with us in business are doing so, because they see that we are a way ahead for them and a partnership. So he doesn't need our permission. He's not going to ask for it if we don't, and so if this administration, which is now, by the way, 3 different times got Americans in peril through their actions, and there is some culpability there with that because of the money and the way that this administration has handled Iran.
Right.
You don't have to speak on that if you don't want to, but the fact that they've already said there's no way there could be a connection. You can't say that, and the fact is that no one's going to believe you anyhow when you loosen money. And when Iran immediately says, yes, we love this, I don't care what you say on where the money went to. Right. This is, we have some culpability here, and we're going to help. We're going to get in there and get involved with it. But I get upset about the State Department and their inability to get these things right, and their ability so far in this administration, which again, this is not a surprise. These guys have struggled the last 20 years to get this stuff right. Their ability to get Americans trapped behind enemy lines has proven to be shocking over the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 administrations.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much to pull from this conflict in terms of that we as a collectively as society have not scratched the surface. And the first one is what's the result of the differences of different approaches. Reagan had his approach. You had and you saw the dealing with the hostages in Beirut. And if you remember the numbers that folks that were there, some of them were there for years.
Yeah.
Before we were able to get them, and that's and then the killing of the army officer, or was he a Marine, the Lieutenant Colonel Higgins, he was executed as a UN peacekeeper. I mean, there's been different approaches, and I try to remain, and I just from what I do now for a job, but I have to approach this as apolitically as possible. But the problem is you're dealing with a very political topic. And that's
and I'm being critical of an administration that wanted the job, and so you get the criticism when you want the job.
Right. Well, one thing to look at, and this is some of the things is, and I wrote about this a year and a half ago when Afghanistan fell, and I said it right then when I even put it in the article and said it I think I even said it with an interview with you. But we talked about, it's like when Afghanistan fell and we left $86 billion worth of military equipment.
Yeah.
I said, start your watch for a year and a half, and a year and a half later, that's the start of the window where something bad is going to happen, because somebody's going to use that equipment, spread it around the world, use the money that is raised from that, and start conducting terror attacks. If you look at the weapons that have been used in all the previous Arab-Israeli wars, these were Russian. They were using Russian equipment, AK-47s, AKMSs, 74s. I mean, that was their primary weapon. If you look on the video today, what are they all carrying? They're carrying M4s.
Yeah.
It's got a better range. There's, you got to take care of it a little better than an AK-47, but it's a more modern weapon. So where did they get all of those? Yeah. Where did the cash come from? And that's going to be, this is what I would look for, if you're watching any kind of news reports or commentary or whatever, is there is going to be a great study in following the cash, following the logistics, who funded these folks. I mean, we understand the attacks. We understand, and we just talked about, how, you go with what works. That hasn't worked. Okay, we're going to go to the next thing. But now there's going to be an unraveling of money. And I know, that there's, when the Biden administration freed up $6 billion for the Iranians as part, that was as recently as I think the middle of September 14th. That money specifically, the operation had already been planning for a year and a half before that money was freed up. But that allows that allows continuous operation, or that allows, if the Iranians know that money is coming, that allows them to spend money.
Right.
And they can say, yeah, we used it for, medical or schools or whatever within our country, but money is fungible. So, and the money that we didn't spend, we used to do whatever we wanted to.
Yeah.
So that's, so you've got such a plus up and such a windfall from that coming in. It's I don't want to make any, predictions right now, but wait till you see, our own investigators, and it's going to be across the board, are going to start tracing this money and you're going to be able to portray all of these networks that are in place, besides these other groups that are coming out of the woodwork now and saying, yes, we now support. You got to understand, from a terror group, there's a big difference between an Al-Qaeda type terror group and ISIS, which were independently run operations. They got their funding, they did their deals and things like that. Whereas Hamas are contractors. And there's several terrorist organizations that were like that. Palestinian Liberation Organization, they were contractors to other powers that funded them. Hamas is a contractor, so they're going to change their goals and objectives to whoever is funding them. And even Al-Qaeda had their subsidiary groups that they contracted out. The Madrid bombings of 2006, if I remember the year right, that was conducted by a group that was normally we would not carry out an attack like that. In fact, it was such a self-destructive attack, they ended up wiping out the major cell that was involved and literally blew themselves up in an apartment before Spanish police were able to gain access. Yeah. They were contractors to Al-Qaeda. So they were doing the bidding of another organization. It's I scratch your back, you scratch mine. You scratch mine with a couple of hundreds of thousands or millions, and now, or in this case, could be, now we're talking in the realm of billions of dollars of funding to conduct this. We're going to give you this money, but you're going to do what we need you to do. And what we need you to do is this coordinated attack. But this is one of those cases where I think they really feel that this could be the tipping point where we're able to overrun, part of the country and defeat it. It's never going to happen. The Israelis are a nuclear armed country. They will never let that happen.
I'm getting questions on my phone while we're talking, so
okay.
I don't want to put you in a spot, because I know we have to be careful how we talk about this. So I want to ask the Erik that was involved in understanding the cells that were planning 9/11. And since we're likening this to a 9/11 attack, and we're wondering what happened, look, it's easy to point at the IC and go, "What happened?" This just turns out this stuff's really hard. Right. When the enemy is planning something and they don't want to get caught, they tend to not tell anybody that they're doing this stuff. Right. Now, this is complex, right? So, in a way that you can, if you can, how does this get by? Our intel sources, how we share with Israel. How does Israel and their human network? How does this get by these guys? Is it just a good operation, good on the Palestinians, or? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Well, because it's easy to see something ahead of time, or know that, right?
Right. Well, here's your third level of analysis that's going to come out of this: is how did the Israeli intelligence fail so badly at this?
Right.
And it's been, part of it can be just like at 9/11. We didn't think that this could happen. This is one of those called high impact, low probability events, and intel analysis has analytical techniques structured specifically to try to identify that. But again, it's one of those things where when you as an analyst, you have to say, this is what I think is going to happen. When you see something like that, it is something so radical, something so large. Before 9/11, while we were looking at Al-Qaeda, we knew something was coming. And all of us on the team, we were, in fact, on the evening of 9/11, we were all on the phone with each other, said, we knew this was coming. Nobody would listen to us.
Right.
There was, we weren't able to get into the specifics and dive into the data because the lawyers didn't like what we were doing with data mining and shut us down because they thought we were infringing on U.S. persons and that kind of thing. But that shut us down and stopped us from then going further to find out what it was. Right. But we had the New Jersey cell. But you get to the point, and even there's been several attacks. It's like, well, here, all the pieces were right here. How come you didn't see it? It's because these pieces are awash in and everything else, or all the distractions. Again, a holiday was going to happen. But when I say this has been a year and a half to 2 years of planning to do this, there were indicators all the way, but none of them obviously were picked up. And there's going to be some, there's going to be some external. Americans love to investigate everything, and we love to have conspiracy theories about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I even read one this morning that, there was internal conflict within Israeli politics because there's elements of the intelligence of the intelligence community of Israel. They're trying to get rid of. We're focusing themselves not on the protection of their own country, but to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu, because they felt that he was the threat more than anybody else. So
they love to hate that guy.
Well, when you're focused on in that area, then you're taking your eye off the ball.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be, again, there's going to be some repercussions that are going to be massive, not only from the an organization standpoint, but honest to God, Pete, I would not go so far to say that this, or I would go so far to say that this could be the end of Hamas and the end of an independent Gaza Strip.
Yeah, and before we wrap up what you were just talking about, the early detection, almost 100% sure, and I'll just take this dart and I'll throw it at the wall. All the pieces are there that it was known, just like Pearl Harbor, but it wasn't possible in real time for whatever reasons, distraction, a whole bunch of things coming in, and whatever, it is a holiday or whatever, right? Like anything can happen. It just takes one link in that chain to break, and then it happens, right? It's the times when the chain doesn't get broken, you go, oh, there it is, and we were able to intercept those things. And even those, it's luck a lot of times. It's just luck. So I think we'll find out that it was discoverable, just didn't get discovered, and someone will write an algorithm and will improve it. And also, Iron Dome wasn't as effective as they thought it might be, and it turns out you can overwhelm it. And I imagine that they will, they'll fix that. They'll, they'll learn from that as well.
Right.
What did you just? Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, it's one of those. It's again one of those things. And after the IRA tried to assassinate Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, one of the things. I mean, they blew up I think they blew up a hotel. She just happened not to be there. She was there earlier. And they just missed her. But one of the things they send out as a message is that the Thatcher and the British government, they have to be successful every time. We only have to be successful once.
Yeah. And even just the attempt, it's like, wow, we're vulnerable and we never even considered this. Now all these resources have to go into protecting her more, and it's just.
Again, one of the objectives of a terror organization is that you have to show that you're moving forward. Nobody is going to join your organization. Yeah. If your stated goals and objectives are, we're going to hang out for 20 years and do nothing.
Right.
Why would I risk my life to join an extremist organization? And it's the concept is called the shark always has to move forward. And if it's not, it can't breathe and it dies. And so for these extremist organizations, especially, hardcore terrorist ones like Hamas, just hanging out and ruling a city that with, funding coming in from different organizations, you have to do something with that. You're not going to get the funding. You're not going to be able to stay in power. You're not, unless you do something. So this is a requirement for them for stay alive. It's a very self-destructive reason, but they still have to do it just because of the way that who they are and how they, how they get their funding and how they live.
Right now, there are analysts with all of their targeting packages, and they're refreshing everything. I mean, you don't got to get into this if you don't want to, but I'll say this because I don't work for anybody. I just know how targeting works. And you go, oh, okay, here's Abu so-and-so, Abu so-and-so, Abu so-and-so, and everybody's gathering information. And people are nominating people, and people are going to die. They're going to be bad people. And if you're in Abbas, or you're in Abbas adjacent, or if your cousin is in Abbas, you better look out, because here's what's going to happen. Commanders who are partnered with or in the IDF, they're going to start saying yes to killing people. And I'm telling you now, the IDF isn't going to care where you are. You can go hide yourself anywhere. They'll come kill you.
This is the most, unfortunately, this is the most horrible part of the whole story is we already know that the Israeli response is going to be brutal. They've said so. Yeah. And what that means is they are going to roll into Gaza Strip with armored vehicles, and they are going to systematically go through and wipe out every terrorist cell. The worst part of this is the amount of needless, innocent deaths that you already know are going to take place.
Yep.
The families, the children, the women, and you're going to, this specifically when your own organization wants that to happen to your own people so that you can use that for propaganda purposes. That's got to be the most horrific and sickening part of this whole thing. Is that you're willing to do that, and in order to trigger that, you're willing to kill and display the bodies of women, children. I mean, I've been reading the reports all day.
Yeah,
it's after a while you just have to turn it off. It's just
you have to turn it off.
Horrible. Yeah. More of that is coming now, and but that was also part of the plan. There's no, this is not an attack where they thought, well, we're going to do this great attack, go back and have a great time, and then foreign money is going to continue to flow into the Gaza from the U.S. Again, I think the latest one was we sent them $75 million for whatever foreign aid reason. We're now, and we just signed. I just saw something where we just signed a bill to send the Israelis $4.5 billion to help defend themselves, and then we move the Ford Carrier Group into the area. So we're using our money and our resources and potentially our blood to fight against our money that we had previously sent to everything else, and then that turns into again a study of policy is you can spend the treasure on your adversary. They will still hate you.
Yeah. We're also, and I know you're not going to say it, but we are also fighting our own policy, and it's a little bit crazy.
That's what I mean by that. There is going to be a study of money on this one, a study of resources and who funded what, and I'm telling you, it's going to get ugly, and it's not going to get ugly just over there. It's going to get ugly over here. Very ugly.
Yeah. And by the way, this probably needs to be said. Look, there was a difference between Palestine and Hamas. I don't think that distance doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, actually, the Palestinian Authority were booted out of office by Hamas. Whether you want to say it was a corrupt election or not, the Palestinian Authority, which was kind of Yasser Arafat and some of the moderates, they have since backed this one up. Fatah was the militant arm of the Palestinian Authority. They are no longer in power, but because they're distinct, there were two distinct different groups.
Yeah. The other thing I guess we should say too is Israel, within its power, is going to do things to prevent loss of life. Like they're doing things like they're doing the building knock before they send the big stuff. They're doing some of that. They're going to provide comfort and aid, when possible. But when possible, it is not the first objective. The first objective is to destroy these cells. And if it's going to be grisly, and it's going to be international. You're welcome to go to Yemen. It doesn't matter, man. You're going to need a phone to live,
right?
Or you're going to have to live like an animal in a cave. Right. And the second you pop your head up, the second you take a picture, people understand now. There's nowhere on the earth you can go take a picture, and that a computer can't go beep grid coordinate like instantly, whether it's metadata on the picture itself or just the background thing. And this is not new. You can look at any movie, you can see this kind of thing done, right? It's been done for 20 years. So that's not anything classified, but you cannot hide like you could 20, 30 years ago. You just can't. No. And so these guys are going to be, and this is not an 18-month, like the Americans will be like, wait, what? When did that happen? We will forget about this instantly. The Israelis will not forget about it instantly.
Yeah.
And they will carry and not just the vendetti, it'll be plural. They will carry them and they will exact revenge until it's done. And also all of the accords, all of the peace agreements, all of that wiped off the map. All the cement walls are going to get moved forward as far as they feel like it. It's all changed now.
Well, I mean, and I might be wrong on this aspect, but I honestly think that these other moderate Arab nations that in the past have backed military or even paramilitary incursions against Israelis. I think with this one, I think they're done.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get again. you can't look at it just as a Palestinian versus Israel. You have to look at this in terms of Saudi Arabia versus Iran, or Shia versus Sunni, Sunni versus Shia. Again, you're going to have this same issue, and this is how it gets scary, because now you're talking about a almost nuclear Iran, and as soon as they go nuclear, you're going to have other countries like the Saudis that are going to say, well, if they have them, we're going to need to have them. And you also see attempts to bring the U.S. into the conflict. I mean, this is where, now I was talking about this a while ago as well, is, last year we stopped 100 illegals crossing the southern border. I think we stopped 100 of them. And for every one that we stopped, 2 get through.
Yeah.
This year we stopped 160 individuals on the terror watch list. This is just FY22 or 23.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a huge increase. There are potentially more extremists that have entered into our country illegally that could, again, start your planning cycle of how long that would take. If they weren't part of this plan and haven't already gotten to the point where they're looking at targets, weaponizing their, getting ready to the weaponization phase. That's what I would be looking for from a Homeland Security standpoint. I would be ratcheting up all of our assets to start screening, finding, and because they're here. I know they're here.
Todd Bensman's an expert on this
It's impossible for them not to be here.
I'll get him on the show. Maybe you guys should be on the show together. Todd Bensman studies this, and he looks at all the different ways that you can get across the border. And this has nothing to do with legitimate asylum seekers, people looking to become citizens of this nation, or even folks just trying to get a better life. We're not talking about any of that. What we're talking about are people looking to do nefarious things. The good news is that the U.S. is so wonderful. A lot of these nefarious people just kind of like, oh, you know what? I like wings. I like having money. I learned how to code, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm not so mad anymore. And that does happen often enough. I
would tell you, though, a lot of the major terrorist leaders have come to the U.S., have lived here, and have gone back and have hardened themselves. So in fact, one of the founding members of Hamas, I think he attended the University of Northern Colorado for a time in the 50s.
Yeah.
And was so disgusted by the display, again, this is 1950s, so was so disgusted by the display of sex and promiscuity in the 50s that he went back and became hardened. One of the members of Al-Qaeda, I can't place some of the names right now, but attended the University of, I think it was University of Central Florida or University of, it was the University of Florida. I can't remember which school it was, but it was, again, had worked there. And so there is also a case where, with the very strict adherence to Islam coming into the U.S. and having, or I don't say very strict, but having a Islamic fundamentalist viewpoint, and then coming into the West and seeing how decadent it was. I mean, Mohammed Atta and the 9/11 pilots, they all lived in a Hamburg cell, Hamburg, Germany. Good Lord, the Reaper's bond is there. I mean, if you know what that is, and that's, same thing as the Nuremberg, the wall of the Nuremberg. It's their red light district. You're exposed to that, and your mind just goes wild, and it's just so hard to process and absorb that. So it becomes a revulsion. You go back to your home country and become very hardened against the decadence of the West. And that's just one example.
Right. Yeah. Or you go to University of Florida or Florida State and you just walk around campus for a couple hours. Either you were cured of your fundamentalism, or it is cured like cement in your heart, because has to be some beautiful young women that have to, if you have all the ability to go, you know what, I'm gonna talk to some of these girls. I
would tell you, when I went to the Armor Basic School as a brand new second lieutenant, it was then at Fort Knox. We had 3 different types of students. We had your regular students who went to ROTC, and then you had your West Pointers. And you knew where a West Pointer lived because in the little kitchen window of his quarters, you had all his liquor bottles were lined up, so you could see it from the street, and you could just drive through West Pointer, because they'd just been cut off from that, and they just they were just trying to do they were socially catching up.
Yeah,
but then
That's so true.
We had 2 officers from Yemen that were in our class, and they lived together in their own BOQ apartment. And when we stopped by to pick them up for some group exercise, whatever we were doing, the entire inside of their BOQ was full of pornography and alcohol.
Good.
this was their time to, and we were
Yeah.
to the point where, it was like 22 at the time. It
Yeah.
was like, I was shocked.
It was the Rumspringer.
Right.
Like, go
Right.
crazy, man. Do
And
it.
these guys were great. I mean, these guys were
Yeah.
great guys. I mean, one guy was showing me all the wounds he had taken from his fighting. He said he had an 81 millimeter mortar that he had to keep in his garage. I mean, it was that kind of thing. That his lifestyle, it was great to learn from him, but it was also interesting to see the culture shock that they were going through in very subtle ways as they were attending this school.
I want to ask you a little bit about Iran too, because one of the things I said in this group is, if I was president, and you get to say ridiculous things when you're not president, but I would have my staff put a picture up on X with me, a couple of, packets that would have the leaders of Iran on there, and a hourglass, and it'd be like, TikTok, motherfuckers, you better make some decisions quick. I expect some phone calls, but that'd just be me. But legitimately, Israel is going to be pointing its eyes to the south and to the east and saying, all right, they have targets. They're prepared to go. And look, you don't have to take out everything, but you could take out key things. And they don't do it partly because they want to cooperate with us. I don't know that cooperation is going to be available to this administration. I'm not making a political statement. I'm just saying that based upon the position they've been put in, and they can rightfully say, we'll worry about the investigation later. Right now, we're in operation mode. And during operation mode, it can be a little sloppy. But you go start taking out the water sources that are required and, go throw some code at some more, spinning things and destroy some things over in Iran. Because you can't take the gamble that it's a peaceful effort to enrich uranium, right? You just can't take that gamble if you're Israel.
Right.
So I'm wondering, in the next 24 months, if there aren't some incursions of some kind or another into Iran, or if it's not done by them, if it's done through some other means. But I have to believe that there's going to have to be a cost for Iran.
There is precedent. I mean, they have gone in with an airstrike in the past and taken out nuclear facilities where research were being conducted. I mean, there's also the teachings when Ahmadinejad was in charge of Iran. One of the things he believed was that that the return of the return of the Islamic State was going to happen, and it was inevitable. So we have to prepare for the return of the Islamic State. The Islamic State hasn't existed in their eyes since 1918 at the end of World War I and the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, which coincidentally created what was then called the British Mandate of Palestine. And it was military officers that were that had drawn and designed, they drew up, this is the boundaries. This is what Syria is going to look like. This is what Palestine is going to look like. Lebanon, and created these different countries, not based upon ethnic groups or religion or anything like that. So there's some, it's to understand this. You have to go, back as far as 100 years. Even Osama bin Laden, when he issued his great fatwa of, I think it was 1998, after the Kenya and Tanzania bombings. One of the things that he stated was, this is for the past 100 years of or 90 years of injustice, or something like that. Whatever. Yeah. 80 years. I'm sorry. He said 80 years of injustice. And a lot of folks are scratching their heads like, what are you talking about? 80 years. It's like 1918, the fall of the last Islamic Caliphate. That's what he's upset about. Generations ago. And so that's again, we think in terms of 4 years, which presidential administration, and we do our own studies. How did this administration do? What worked? What didn't? I mean, it's the same thing with Carter bringing the Egyptians and Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat together for not the Dayton Peace Accords, that ended the conflict in Bosnia. For I'm trying to remember the name of the peace accords. Yasser Arafat, as part of the PLO, that was horrible for him. Yeah. For Anwar Sadat, his life ended soon after from a terrorist attack. And a terrorist attack against an Egyptian leader that ended his life. And so that's But that's the kind of thing that we're seeing. There's so many different players. There's so many different things to unravel and unpack. Yeah. But I'm telling you, it's like the entire thing is the one thing to look at is look at the money, look at the tactics, and look at the all of the power struggle between Sunnis and Shiites, and then the intelligence failures. All of these have to stack up on top of each other, and you have to understand all of them to understand one of them.
One more big area to think about, and it links in directly, because we are, I would say, as a nation, we are for Ukraine, but we're fed up of paying for it. And all of a sudden, we've got this new girlfriend over here who needs some money and support. And so, boy, oh boy, and an election coming up, right?
Right.
And so no one's going to be running on funding Ukraine. I can't imagine that's going to be on anybody's docket. But if Israel needs our help, I think they're going to get it. So what are your thoughts on old girlfriend, new girlfriend here?
It's interesting how it shifts, It seems like, and this is brought about by our own media attention, is they're a very myopic industry. So they can only focus on one thing at a time. And so when all the attention was in Afghanistan, all the attention was there. Immediately they're like, we don't care about that anymore because that doesn't draw in viewers. So now we're going to talk about Ukraine. I'm telling you, Ukraine just got dropped like a hot potato. From a attention standpoint, from the media standpoint. Now, again, folks in the national security industry is like, actually, we're working our butts off continuously on everything. If I was in Taiwan or if I was in PACOM, I would be on full alert. Just because of the timing of this. This is one of those. We have so many things that are in place. We're never going to have a better window. We have the Americans distracted in Ukraine with their money and resources and a ton of ammunition and armaments going into Ukraine. Now we have Americans involved with trying to look in another direction. And it's tough. When we went into Beirut for the peacekeeping, if you are going to be a peacekeeper, you have to stay as neutral as possible. The perception, and one of the reasons why both the Americans were bombed by Hezbollah terrorists, as well as the French, and a lot of people don't know that, as the French were bombed as well on the same day, with I think 79 to 80 casualties that they had taken. Again, because the perception was that we had taken sides. Mm-hmm. This conflict is one of those where you cannot stay neutral in this conflict. The way, when you see the horrific images that are coming out, in fact, the State Department issued that all sides statement, and it was honestly whoever put that out there. And I know it wasn't official State Department because they deleted it, but that was utterly ridiculous and to say that. It's like you cannot see this unprovoked attack. And again, now they'll say, well, it was provoked over the last 20 years of injustice. None of that justifies. So there's really no taking, at least in the eyes of the folks that matter. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of countries that normally would say, well, Israel, back off and don't attack these guys. They're going to remain. Those folks who would normally say that are going to remain pretty silent. Hollywood especially, they're going to be like, we're going to. Same thing with even Saudi Arabia or Egypt or the Maghreb, the Northern Africa Arab nations. They're going to stay silent, and you may actually see some support at a covert level. And then, actually, you wouldn't see it, but I wouldn't count that out as well. But you may say, you know what, we actually have this guy here, and you can have him.
And let's give Bibi Netanyahu a little bit of credit for being a good statesman and knowing how to work his region, because he keeps getting elected because he keeps working for Israel. They've gone forward, and he's been PM most of the last 20 years. And unlike us, where we've kind of like struggled over the last 20 years, Israel's gone forward well. Yeah. And he could pick up the phone and he can call a lot of his neighbors, and they are no longer constantly attacking him.
Right.
Gaza, okay, yeah, sure. But
This was one of the things, like during the Clinton administration, when they had the Palestinians, it was the Yasser Arafat in Paris with the Israelis to do negotiation, and Ehud Barak was a prime minister, and they were prepared to give them, I think, 97% of what they'd asked for. And Yasser Arafat got up and walked out.
Yep.
And it's like, and I think the one of the anecdotal rumors was that, Madeleine Albright, then our Secretary of State, was chasing him through the halls to try to get him to come back. And one of the reasons why that didn't work was because if you give me 100% of what I want, I can no longer justify my organization. You're giving me so much political success that there's no reason for me to exist. I can't accept that.
Right.
So that's, again, there's so many things to unpack here that, we're just getting started. I mean, we come back to this in a couple of weeks and you'll see there's gonna be a lot of stuff that you and I just talked about that never happened, or we were just flat out wrong. But
for sure,
a lot of things to look for. And I'm telling you right now, it's a combination of all those layers that need to be unpacked to understand this.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to get, I just had him on the show the other day, but I'm going to get Ambassador Robert Hunter, former ambassador to NATO for President Clinton, on the show, because not only does he know a lot about Ukraine, he knows a lot about Iran, and he knows a lot about brokering deals because he was one of the guys involved in Dayton and many other deals over the last decades. And I'm going to ask him, and maybe you want to join me for that, because it's fascinating to hear him talk about, what it takes to broker these things, and when would he want to get involved? Like if he was still in the game, and because you're not going to talk the Israelis into coming to the table right now. They're going to have to go out and
they're busy. That's what they're going to say. We're busy. I mean, again, like I said, I've talked to a couple of Israeli officers over the years, and when they get to talking about the defense and even some of the writings, I read several books written by Israelis, they are extremely no nonsense. There's no fooling around with honestly, and you think it was kind of ridiculous. They don't fool around with pronouns. They're not fooling around with the feelings of anybody. It's almost like you are from your own Western. We live in a very comfortable society, comfortable life. Relatively compared to the rest of the world. You don't get that. You're immediately, this is the type of society where you go out and you check your car underneath every other morning.
Yeah, right.
Just to show somebody that you're checking your car. That kind of thing. That's your life.
So Israel has its hawks and its doves, right? And the hawks, to their credit, have let the doves do a lot of the work. But they've been like, hey, it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. Well, now it has been too much. And so now the doves are going to have to go, we have to let the hawks fly. Because if you don't, the hawks will tear everything apart. And so the hawks are going to go hunt. Yeah. And again, I can't even describe how ready they have been for this and how hard they're going to do it. And the intel community, look, they might have missed this. They are not going to miss on the way out. And here's a reality. And this is just Pete talking. This is not Erik talking. When you have intel people trying to find people to kill for the people who go out and kill people, we make mistakes and we kill the wrong people. That's going to happen. It's for sure going to happen. So when we're talking about this, we have to prepare ourselves. Israel's going to go out and exact revenge, and it's going to mean innocent people or people who didn't do this, they're going to get killed. And all of this goes back to Hamas hunting down kids at a Palestine-Israel peace rave, and that can't ever lose sight of that. This wouldn't happen if they had just continued down the crappy road they were on instead of this horrible, deadly road that they're now on.
But I would tell you, their propaganda effort is one of the most, I don't mean the Israelis, but I mean the Palestinian propaganda effort is one of the most sophisticated on the planet. Mm-hmm. You can expect to see, I mean, I'll guarantee you will, even if it's staged, you're going to see, this reprisal of this school or whatever. Yeah. Forget about that artillery piece that's sitting right in there in pieces. Mm-hmm. But they killed so many children or whatever. Yeah. I'm telling you, they're going to work as hard as they can to try to make the Israelis not revenge or the next couple of weeks of Israeli actions. You're going to see them try to get as much as possible. The information warfare on this is going to be absolutely intense, and you can see it already from the time it started on social media. Left and right this is and most of it's going to be crappy. It's just you have to have a very critical eye on everything you read to see, well, who's the source, why did they write this, what's their what's their overall opinion, who's backing them, who's paying for them, and all that thing.
Mhm.
And a lot of us are not equipped to do that.
Yeah. Right. And deep fakes and all the different ways you can make things. It's gonna be tough to tell. Hey, anything in closing? Anything you wanted to get to that we didn't get to?
No, I mean, this is one of those. Again, this is one of those things where you're going to see some things that you've never seen before in terms of Israeli conflicts the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
These honestly, this would probably be brutal. And again, my thing is like this could be the end of Hamas and the end of Palestinian occupation of Gaza. I don't think they have the patience to stand up to put up with it anymore, and I don't think the rest of the world, especially within the Arab world, have the patience to put up with it as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's going to be painful, and it's what's sad to say there are innocent people that are alive today that will not be alive in a few weeks because of this.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true, and I think you're right. I think the goal for right now is
that's the curse of this. The curse of this whole thing.
Yeah. All right, stand by. Let me shut this thing down.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.